Sergeant James Mitchell stood perfectly still outside Buckingham Palace. His red uniform was spotless. His black hat sat perfectly on his head. His face showed no emotion at all. This was his job. He was one of the Queen's guards, and he had been doing this for 5 years. The morning sun was bright. Tourists gathered behind the metal barriers. They took pictures and talked in excited voices. Some tried to make the guards smile or move, but James never did. He was trained to be like a statue, but today something felt different. James had taken new medicine that morning for his back pain. Now he felt dizzy. His head was spinning, but he could not move. He could not ask for help. The rules were very clear. A Queen's Guard must never break from his position during duty. Behind the crowd, a small girl in a red coat watched him carefully. Her name was Emma Patterson. She was 7 years old and had come from Ireland with her grandmother to see the palace. Emma had been sick for 2 years with cancer, but she was getting better now. Emma's grandmother, Mary, had been a nurse in the army many years ago. During Emma's time in the hospital, Mary had taught her granddaughter sign language. It helped them talk when Emma was too weak to speak out loud. Mary had also taught Emma some things her grandfather knew, like Morse code. As Emma watched the guard, she noticed something strange. His fingers were moving very slightly against his rifle. Most people would not see it, but Emma's sharp eyes caught the movement. Her grandfather had taught her Morse code before he died. She started to understand what the guard was spelling. With his fingers, H-E-L-P, H-E-L-P, H-E-L-P. Emma's heart began to beat faster. The guard needed help, but he could not ask for it. She looked around at all the people taking pictures and laughing. No one else could see what she saw. Emma tugged on her grandmother's coat. "Grandma," she whispered, "the guard is asking for help." Mary looked down at her granddaughter. "What do you mean, dear?" "He's tapping Morse code. He keeps spelling H-E-L-P with his fingers." Mary looked at the guard more carefully. Her years as a military nurse had taught her to spot when someone was in trouble. She could see it now. The guard's face was too pale. Small drops of sweat were on his forehead even though the morning was cool. "Are you sure about the Morse code?" Mary asked quietly. Emma nodded. "Grandpa taught me before he got sick. The guard needs help, but he can't move." Mary thought for a moment. Then she said, "What should we do?" Emma looked at the guard again. She had an idea. "I can use sign language," she said. "Maybe he will understand." Before her grandmother could stop her, Emma walked closer to the metal barrier. The guard's eyes moved slightly to look at her. Emma began to sign with her hands. She made the signs for "Are you okay?" and "I can help." James could not believe what he was seeing. This little girl was using sign language. He had learned some sign language when his younger brother was born deaf. He understood what she was asking. His eyes widened just a little bit. For the first time in 5 years, James made a choice that went against his training. He moved his eyes toward the guardhouse where other soldiers were waiting. Then he looked back at Emma and nodded his head just once, very slightly. Emma understood right. "Wait." She ran back to her grandmother. "He needs help, Grandma." He looked at the guardhouse. "I think he's going to fall down." Mary had seen enough medical emergencies to know Emma was right. She looked around and saw a security officer standing near the palace gates. She walked over to him quickly. "Excuse me," she said in a quiet voice. "I think one of your guards might be having a medical problem. My granddaughter noticed he was signaling for help." The security officer looked at Mary carefully. He saw her calm, serious face and the way she spoke. This was not a tourist making trouble. "Which guard?" he asked. Mary pointed to James. "That one. He's very pale and sweating. My granddaughter saw him tapping Morse code asking for help." The security officer looked at James with trained eyes. He had worked at the palace for 10 years. He could see the signs too now that he was looking for them. "Thank you," he said to Mary. He spoke into his radio very quietly. Within 2 minutes, another guard in the same red uniform walked calmly toward James's position. To the tourists, it looked like a normal change. They did not know this was an emergency. The new guard took his position next to James. He whispered very quietly, "Medical relief. You can step back." James felt a wave of relief wash over him. He stepped back slowly and walked toward the guardhouse. His legs felt weak, but he made it safely inside. The tourists kept taking pictures of the new guard. They never knew anything had happened. Emma watched as the guard she had helped disappeared into the guardhouse. She felt proud that she had been able to help someone who needed it. "You did a good thing," her grandmother said, putting her arm around Emma. "You probably saved that young man from getting very sick or hurt." Emma smiled. "Grandpa always said we should help people when we can." Later that day, James felt much better after resting and drinking water. The palace doctor said his new medicine had caused low blood pressure, which made him dizzy. James could have fainted and fallen during the ceremony if he had not gotten help. James asked to speak with the security officer who had helped him. "There was a little girl and her grandmother," he said. "They saw I was in trouble when no one else did. I need to thank them." But when the security officer looked for Emma and Mary, they had already left to catch their flight back to Ireland. 6 months passed. Emma was doing very well with her treatment. The doctors said her cancer was almost gone. She was back in school and playing with her friends again. One day, a package arrived at Emma's house in Belfast. It was addressed to her from Buckingham Palace. Inside was a letter and a small pin with the Queen's Guard symbol on it. The letter said, "Dear Emma, my name is Sergeant James Mitchell. I was the guard you helped 6 months ago when you visited Buckingham Palace with your grandmother. Your quick thinking and kind heart saved me from a very embarrassing and dangerous situation. I have been trying to find you to say thank you. The palace security helped me locate your address. I want you to know that what you did was very brave and smart. I heard from your grandmother's letter that you have been fighting cancer. You are the strongest and most caring person I have ever met. Please keep this pin as a reminder that you are a real hero. Thank you for teaching me that sometimes the most important thing is to accept help when we need it, and to always be ready to help others. Your friend, James Mitchell, Queen's Guard." Emma held the pin carefully in her hands. She showed it to her grandmother, who had tears in her eyes. "He remembered us," Emma said with wonder. "Of course he did," Mary said. "You probably gave him one of the best days of his life by showing him such kindness." Emma pinned the small guard pin to her school backpack. Every day when she saw it, she remembered that even small people can do big things when they choose to help others. She also remembered her grandfather's words about always being ready to help people in need. From that day on, Emma knew she wanted to be a nurse like her grandmother when she grew up. She wanted to help people the way she had, help the guard at the palace. Sometimes the most important moments in life come from the smallest acts of kindness. Emma Patterson pressed her small face against the cold window of the airplane. Far below, she could see the lights of London getting bigger and brighter. Her grandmother Mary sat beside her, holding Emma's tiny hand in her wrinkled one. "Are we almost there, Grandma?" Emma asked. Her voice was soft and tired from the long trip from Belfast. Mary smiled at her granddaughter. "Yes, dear. We will be at the hotel soon. Tomorrow we will see Buckingham Palace and the Queen's Guards." Emma's eyes lit up with excitement. She had been dreaming about this trip for months. The doctors had finally said she was strong enough to travel. After 2 long years of being sick with cancer, staying in hospitals and taking medicines that made her feel terrible, Emma was finally getting better. The cancer had started when Emma was only 5 years old. At first, her parents thought she just had a cold that would not go away. But then Emma got weaker and weaker. She could not run and play like other children. Her beautiful blonde hair began to fall out from the strong medicines the doctors gave her. Emma's parents were very scared. They took her to many doctors. The doctors said Emma had leukemia, a kind of cancer that attacks the blood. They said she would need to stay in the hospital for a long time and take very strong medicines to fight the cancer. Those 2 years were the hardest time in Emma's young life. She missed going to school with her friends. She missed playing in the park. She missed feeling strong and healthy. Instead, she spent most days in a hospital bed connected to machines and tubes that helped keep her alive. But Emma was not alone during this difficult time. Her grandmother Mary came to visit her every single day. Mary had raised 5 children of her own and had worked as a nurse in the army when she was younger. She knew how to take care of sick people, and she knew how to make Emma feel better even when the treatments were very painful. When Emma was too weak to talk, Mary taught her sign language. They would sit together for hours, learning how to speak with their hands. Mary showed Emma how to make the shapes for different words with her fingers. Soon, Emma could tell her grandmother when she was hungry, thirsty, or scared without having to use her voice. Mary also taught Emma other things to keep her mind busy during the long hospital days. She showed her how to read Morse code, the special way soldiers used to send messages during wars. Emma's grandfather had been a soldier, and he had known Morse code very well before he died when Emma was 4 years old. "Your grandfather was very brave," Mary would tell Emma as they practiced the dots and dashes of Morse code together. "He always helped other people when they needed it. He would tap messages on my hand when we were in crowded places and could not talk out loud." Emma loved hearing stories about her grandfather. She wished she could have known him better, but she was very young when he got sick and died. Mary showed Emma old pictures of him in his military uniform. He looked strong and kind with gentle eyes that looked just like Emma's. As the months passed, Emma slowly got stronger. The medicines were working. Her hair began to grow back soft and curly. She could walk around the hospital without getting too tired. The doctors smiled more when they came to check on her. "Emma is doing very well," the main doctor told her, parents, and Mary one day. "The cancer is almost gone. She can go home soon and start living like a normal little girl again." Emma's parents cried with happiness when they heard this news. Mary held Emma close and whispered, "Your grandfather would be so proud of how brave you have been." When Emma finally got to go home, everything felt different. Her house looked the same, but she felt like a different person. She had learned so much during her time in the hospital. She could read Morse code and use sign language. She knew how to be patient when things were difficult. Most importantly, she had learned that people could get through very hard times if they had love and support from their family. Emma's parents wanted to do something special to celebrate her getting better. They asked her what she would most like to do. "I want to go to London with Grandma," Emma said right away. "I want to see the palace and the guards in the red uniforms. Grandma showed me pictures in the hospital. They look so strong and brave, like Grandpa was." Emma's parents thought this was a wonderful idea. They knew how much Mary had helped Emma during her sickness. A trip to London would be a perfect way for grandmother and granddaughter to celebrate together. Mary was excited about the trip too. She had never been to London, even though she had lived in Ireland all her life. She bought guidebooks and studied maps. She learned about all the famous places they could visit. "We will see Big Ben and the Tower of London," Mary told Emma as they planned their trip. "But the thing you want to see most is the changing of the guard at Buckingham Palace. The soldiers wear tall black hats and bright red coats. They march in perfect lines and never smile or talk while they are on duty." Emma loved hearing about the guards. She imagined them standing perfectly still like toy soldiers. She wondered if they ever got tired or bored. She practiced standing very still herself, trying to see how long she could go without moving. The trip to London was Emma's first time on an airplane. She was nervous but excited. Mary held her hand during takeoff and told her stories to keep her mind off being scared. Emma looked out the window and watched Ireland get smaller and smaller below them. Now, as their plane landed in London, Emma felt ready for the adventure ahead. She was 7 years old, healthy again, and about to see one of the most famous places in the world with her favorite person. Mary squeezed Emma's hand as they got off the plane. "Tomorrow will be a very special day," she said. "We will see the guards at the palace, and you can take as many pictures as you want." Emma nodded eagerly. She did not know that tomorrow would be much more special than either of them could imagine. She did not know that she would end up helping one of those perfectly still guards in a way that no one else could. All she knew was that she was happy, healthy, and ready for whatever adventure was waiting for her in London. As they rode in the taxi to their hotel, Emma pressed her face to the window again. The streets of London were full of red buses, black cars, and people walking quickly in all directions. Everything looked different from Belfast, but it felt exciting and magical. Tomorrow, Grandma, Emma whispered as they reached their hotel. Tomorrow we see the palace. Mary smiled and hugged her granddaughter close. Tomorrow would indeed be a day they would never forget. The next morning, Emma woke up before her grandmother. Sunlight was streaming through the hotel curtains and she could hear the sounds of London traffic outside. Today was the day she had been waiting for. Today they would see Buckingham Palace and the famous guards. Emma quietly got out of bed and walked to the window. She could see people already walking on the streets below, carrying coffee cups and newspapers. Some were wearing business suits, others had cameras hanging around their necks like tourists. "Good morning, little one," Mary said from her bed. She had been awake for a while, watching Emma look out the window. "Are you ready for our big adventure?" Emma turned around with a huge smile on her face. "Yes, Grandma. Can we go to the palace?" "Right now," Mary laughed. "First we need breakfast and then we will take the underground train to the palace. The changing of the guard ceremony starts at 11 o'clock. We have plenty of time." After eating breakfast at the hotel restaurant, Emma and Mary walked to the nearest underground station. Emma had never seen anything like the London subway system. The tunnels were deep underground and the trains moved very fast. Emma held tightly to her grandmother's hand as they rode the train toward Buckingham Palace. When they came up from the underground station, Emma gasped. There in front of them was a huge, beautiful building with golden gates and perfectly cut grass. Buckingham Palace looked even more amazing than it did in the pictures Mary had shown her in the hospital. "Is the Queen really inside there?" Emma asked, staring at the palace windows. "She might be," Mary said. "But even if she is not there today, this is still her official home in London." There were already many people gathering around the palace gates. Tourists from all over the world had come to see the same thing Emma wanted to see. They spoke different languages and took pictures of everything. Some had big, expensive cameras. Others just used their phones. Emma noticed that everyone was looking toward a small group of guards, standing perfectly still near the palace entrance. These were the Queen's guards she had heard so much about. They wore bright red coats with shiny gold buttons, black pants, and tall black hats made of fur. They held rifles and stood so still that they looked like statues. "Look, Grandma," Emma whispered. "There they are." Mary followed Emma's gaze to the guards. "Yes, dear. Those are the Grenadier Guards. They are some of the best soldiers in the British Army. Their job is to protect the Queen and the royal family." Emma studied the guards carefully. There were 4 of them standing in a line. Each one looked exactly the same as the others. Their uniforms were perfect, their posture was straight, and their faces showed no emotion at all. They stared ahead, and did not seem to notice all the people taking pictures of them. "Why don't they move or smile?" Emma asked. "It is their job to stay perfectly still," Mary explained. "They are trained never to react to anything while they are on duty. People try to make them laugh or move, but a good guard never breaks his concentration." Emma watched as some tourists waved at the guards and called out to them. The guards did not react at all. They kept staring straight ahead as if the tourists were not even there. One guard was standing a little closer to the fence than the others. Emma could see him more clearly. He looked young, maybe the same age as her older cousin. His uniform was spotless, and his rifle was held perfectly straight. But as Emma watched him more carefully, she started to notice small things that other people were not seeing. First, she saw that tiny drops of sweat were forming on the guard's forehead, even though the morning air was cool. His face was also paler than it should be. Most importantly, Emma noticed that his fingers were moving very slightly against his rifle. The movements were so small that almost no one would see them. But Emma had spent 2 years in the hospital with nothing to do but watch and notice small details. She had also learned to pay attention to Morse code patterns from all those hours practicing with her grandmother. Emma moved closer to the fence, pulling Mary with her. She wanted to get a better look at what the guard was doing with his fingers. Tap, 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 tap. Emma's heart started beating faster. She recognized that pattern. It was the Morse code signal for the letter H. Then came tap, 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 tap. That was the letter E. Tap, 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 the letter L, tap, 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 another L, tap, 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 tap. The letter P. Emma watched in amazement as the guard repeated the same pattern over and over again. H-E-L-P, H-E-L-P, H-E-L-P. The guard was asking for help, but he was doing it in a way that almost no one would understand. He could not speak or move from his position, but he was trying to communicate that something was wrong. Emma looked around at all the other tourists. They were all taking pictures and chatting happily. No one else had noticed what she was seeing. No one else understood that one of the guards was in trouble. Emma tugged on her grandmother's coat sleeve. "Grandma," she whispered urgently, "something is wrong with that guard." Mary looked down at Emma with concern. "What do you mean, dear?" "He is tapping Morse code on his rifle. He keeps spelling H-E-L-P over and over again." Mary looked at the guard Emma was pointing to. At first she did not see anything unusual, but then she started to notice the same things Emma had seen. The guard did look pale and sweaty. And now that Emma had pointed it out, Mary could see the tiny finger movements against the rifle. Mary had worked as a military nurse for many years before she got married and had children. She had seen soldiers in distress before. She knew the signs of someone who was trying to stay strong but was struggling with a medical problem. "Are you sure about the Morse code?" Mary asked Emma quietly. Emma nodded. "Grandpa taught me, remember? That guard needs help, but he cannot ask for it because he has to stay still for his job." Mary felt proud of her granddaughter's sharp eyes and quick thinking, but she also felt worried. If the guard was really in trouble, something needed to be done quickly. "What kind of help do you think he needs?" Mary asked. Emma studied the guard more carefully. "He looks sick, Grandma. Like he might fall down. Remember when I got dizzy from my medicines in the hospital? He looks the same way." I felt Mary realized Emma was probably right. The guard might be having a medical emergency, but his training and duty required him to stay at his post no matter what. He was caught between his need for help and his responsibility to do his job. "We need to help him," Emma said with determination. "But how can we do it without getting him in trouble?" Mary thought for a moment. They could not just walk up to the guard and ask if he needed help. That might cause a scene and embarrass him. They needed to find a way to help him quietly and discreetly. "Do you think he would understand sign language?" Mary asked Emma. Emma's eyes lit up. "Maybe. If he knows Morse code, he might know other ways to communicate silently." Emma looked around to make sure no other tourists were paying attention to them. Then she moved as close to the fence as she could get. She was still several feet away from the guard, but she hoped he would be able to see her clearly. Very carefully, Emma began to make the sign language gestures for, "Are you okay?" At first, the guard did not seem to notice her. He kept staring, straight ahead like he was supposed to do. But then, very slowly, his eyes moved down to look at Emma. When he saw her signing, his eyes widened just slightly. Emma continued signing. "I can help you." The guard's reaction told Emma everything she needed to know. He understood what she was saying, and he was grateful that someone had noticed his distress. For just a moment, his professional mask slipped, and Emma could see the relief in his eyes. Now Emma knew for certain that the guard was in trouble and needed help, but she also knew that helping him would require more than just sign language. She and her grandmother would need to find a way to get help for him without causing problems or drawing too much attention. Emma looked up at Mary with determination in her young face. "We have to do something, Grandma. He cannot ask for help himself, so we have to do it for him." Mary nodded. Her granddaughter had shown incredible observation skills and compassion. Now it was time for both of them to show courage and find a way to help a stranger in need. Emma stared at the guard with growing concern. She could see that he was struggling to stay upright. His face was getting paler by the minute, and small beads of sweat were now clearly visible on his forehead. The Morse code tapping against his rifle had become more urgent. H-E-L-P, H-E-L-P, H-E-L-P. "Grandma," Emma whispered. "He is getting worse. We have to do something right now." Mary looked around nervously. There were hundreds of tourists crowding around the palace gates. Camera flashes were going off constantly. Children were laughing and running around. No one else seemed to notice that one of the guards was in distress. "But Emma," Mary said quietly, "what can we do? We cannot just walk up to him. There are rules about not bothering the guards. We might get in trouble, or worse, we might get him in trouble with his commanding officers." Emma understood her grandmother's concerns, but she also knew they could not just stand there and watch the guards suffer. During her 2 years in the hospital, Emma had seen many people who needed help but were too proud or too scared to ask for it. She had learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is reach out to someone who cannot reach out for themselves. "Grandma, remember what you always told me in the hospital?" Emma said. "You said that when someone needs help, we should not worry about rules or what other people might think. We should just help them." Mary smiled despite her worry. Her granddaughter was only 7 years old, but she had already learned lessons about courage and compassion that many adults never learn. Emma continued, "The guard cannot break his rules, but we can break ours if it means helping him. He would do the same thing for us if we needed help." Mary realized that Emma was absolutely right. Her granddaughter had developed a wisdom and bravery during her illness that was far beyond her years. Emma understood that sometimes helping others requires taking risks and making difficult choices. "What do you think we should do?" Mary asked Emma. Emma looked at the guard again. He was still tapping the Morse code message, but his movements were becoming smaller and weaker. Emma was afraid he might collapse at any moment. "I want to try talking to him with sign language again," Emma said. "Maybe I can find out exactly what kind of help he needs." Mary looked around to see if any palace security guards were watching them. She spotted 2 officers in different uniforms standing near the main gate, but they seemed to be focused on controlling the crowd rather than watching individual tourists. "All right," Mary said. "But be very careful, Emma. Move slowly and do not make a big scene." Emma nodded seriously. She understood that this was a very important and delicate situation. She needed to be brave, but she also needed to be smart about how she helped the guard. Emma walked closer to the fence that separated the tourists from the guards. She was now only about 6 feet away from the guard who was in trouble. She could see him much more clearly now, and she was even more worried about his condition. The guard's breathing seemed shallow and quick. His knuckles were white from gripping his rifle so tightly. Emma could tell he was using all his strength, just to stay standing and keep doing his job. Emma began to sign again, but this time she was more specific with her questions. She signed, "What is wrong? Are you sick?" The guard's eyes moved slightly to look at Emma. When he saw her signing, he managed to make a very small nod with his head. It was such a tiny movement that only someone watching very carefully would have seen it. Emma continued signing. "Do you feel dizzy? Like you might fall?" Again, the guard made an almost invisible nod. Emma thought for a moment. During her time in the hospital, she had experienced many different kinds of medical problems. She remembered how it felt when the strong medicines made her dizzy and weak. She remembered how scary it was to feel like she might faint but not be able to tell anyone what was happening. Emma signed a new question. "Do you need someone to get help without making people notice?" This time, the guard's response was more visible. He looked directly into Emma's eyes for just a moment, and she could see gratitude and relief in his expression. Then he looked very briefly toward a small building near the palace gates before looking straight ahead again. Emma understood immediately. The guard was telling her where to find help. The building he had looked at must be where his commanding officers or medical staff were located. Emma signed one more message. "I will get help, stay strong." The guard made one final, tiny nod, and Emma could see that her words had given him hope. Emma walked back to her grandmother, who had been watching the entire exchange with amazement. "What did he tell you?" Mary asked. "He is very dizzy and feels like he might faint," Emma explained. "He looked toward that building over there when I asked where to get help. I think that is where his supervisors are." Mary looked at the building Emma was pointing to. It was a small guardhouse with official-looking people going in and out. Some were wearing the same red uniforms as the guards. Others were in different military uniforms. "Emma, I am so proud of how you handled that," Mary said. "You were brave and smart and kind. But now we need to figure out how to get help for him without causing problems. Emma was quiet for a moment, thinking hard. She knew this was probably the most important problem-solving she had ever had to do. The guard was depending on her to find the right solution. "Grandma," Emma said finally, "you were a nurse in the army, right? You know how to talk to military people?" "Yes, I do," Mary replied. "And you know what it looks like when someone is having a medical emergency?" "Yes, Emma. I have seen it many times." Emma took her grandmother's hand. "Then you are the perfect person to go to that building and tell them what we saw. They will believe you because you used to be a military nurse. You will know how to explain it in a way that helps the guard instead of getting him in trouble." Mary realized that Emma had come up with an excellent plan. Mary did understand military culture and medical emergencies. She would be able to speak to the guard supervisors in a way that would ensure he got help quickly and discreetly. "But what about you, Emma? Do you want to come with me?" Emma shook her head. "I want to stay here and watch him. If he starts to fall down before help comes, I can call out to people. Someone needs to keep an eye on him." Mary was amazed by her granddaughter's mature thinking and selfless concern for a stranger. Emma was willing to stay behind and take on the responsibility of watching over the guard, while Mary went to get professional help. "Are you sure you will be all right here by yourself for a few minutes?" Mary asked. Emma nodded confidently. "I will be fine, Grandma. I am not scared anymore. I know we are doing the right thing." Mary hugged Emma quickly. "You are the bravest and kindest little girl in the world. I will be back as soon as possible with help." As Mary walked toward the guardhouse, Emma positioned herself where she could keep a close eye on the guard. She noticed that his condition seemed to be getting worse. The Morse code tapping was becoming even more urgent and desperate. Emma signed to him one more time. "Help is coming. Hold on." The guard's eyes found Emma's face again, and she could see both gratitude and determination in his expression. He was going to keep doing his job until help arrived, no matter how bad he felt. Emma stood perfectly still, watching over the guard just as carefully as he was watching over the palace. She felt proud that she was able to help someone who needed it, and she felt confident that her grandmother would find the right people to provide proper assistance. In just a few minutes, Emma knew help would arrive for the brave guard who had been too professional to ask for it himself. Sergeant James Mitchell felt his world beginning to spin. The morning medication his doctor had prescribed for his chronic back pain was causing a reaction he had never experienced before. His vision was becoming blurry, and waves of dizziness were washing over him every few seconds. But he could not move. He could not speak. He could not ask for help. James had been a Queen's Guard for 5 years. He had stood through rainstorms, snowstorms, and blazing summer heat without moving a muscle. He had endured tourists shouting at him, children trying to make him laugh, and photographers taking thousands of pictures. He had never broken protocol, not even once. But this was different. This was not about discomfort or annoyance. This was about his safety and his ability to do his job. James knew that if he collapsed while on duty, it would not only be embarrassing for him personally, but it would also reflect poorly on his entire regiment. The Queen's Guards were supposed to be the strongest, most disciplined soldiers in the British Army. James tried to control his breathing and focus on staying upright. He had already been tapping Morse code against his rifle for 20 minutes, hoping that someone might notice and understand. But the chances of finding someone in a crowd of tourists who knew Morse code seemed very slim. Then something extraordinary happened. A small girl with blonde hair and bright blue eyes approached the fence. She was wearing a red coat and holding the hand of an older woman who appeared to be her grandmother. At first, James thought she was just another curious tourist who wanted to stare at the guards. But then the little girl began to sign with her hands. James could hardly believe what he was seeing. She was using proper sign language, and she was asking if he was okay. James had learned sign language when his younger brother Tommy was born deaf 15 years ago. The family had all learned to communicate with Tommy, and James had become quite fluent over the years. But he had never expected to use those skills while standing guard at Buckingham Palace. The little girl continued signing. She asked if she could help him. James realized that this child had somehow noticed his distress when hundreds of other people had not. She had recognized his Morse code signals and understood that he was in trouble. For the first time in his 5-year career, as a Queen's Guard, James faced a choice that went against everything he had been trained to do. The rules were absolutely clear. Never acknowledge tourists, never respond to attempts at communication, never break from position unless officially relieved by a superior officer. But James also remembered another part of his military training. When facing a life-threatening emergency, a soldier's first responsibility is to preserve his ability to serve. If he collapsed during the ceremony, he would be failing in his duty to protect the royal family and uphold the reputation of the guards. James made a decision that terrified him, but felt absolutely necessary. He made eye contact with the little girl and gave her the smallest possible nod to confirm that he needed help. The relief he felt when she nodded back and signed that she would get help was overwhelming. For the first time in 25 minutes, James felt like he might actually make it through this crisis without collapsing in front of hundreds of tourists and television cameras. James watched as the little girl spoke quietly to her grandmother, then positioned herself where she could keep watching him while the older woman walked toward the guardhouse. The child's plan was smart and thoughtful. She had found a way to get professional help while minimizing attention and potential embarrassment. As James waited for help to arrive, he found himself thinking about the extraordinary courage and kindness the little girl had shown. Most adults would have been too intimidated or confused to get involved in such a situation, but this child had not only noticed his distress, she had also figured out how to help him in the most appropriate way possible. James continued to feel worse physically, but mentally he felt better than he had in weeks. His job as a Queen's Guard could sometimes feel lonely and disconnected from real human interaction. Day after day, he stood perfectly still, while people treated him like a tourist attraction rather than a human being. But this little girl had seen him as a person who needed help, and she had responded with immediate compassion and intelligence. The Morse code tapping against his rifle had changed from desperate calls for help to a message of gratitude. He began, spelling out THANKYOU over and over again, hoping the little girl would understand that her kindness meant everything to him. James could see the child watching him carefully from her position near the fence. Every few seconds she would sign a short message. Help is coming, or stay strong, or you can do it. Her signs gave him the encouragement he needed to keep standing, despite feeling like he might faint at any moment. After what felt like hours, but was probably only 5 minutes, James saw movement from the corner of his eye. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison, his commanding officer, was walking calmly toward the guard positions. Behind him was Sergeant Williams, one of the relief guards, who was always kept on standby for emergencies. James had never been so happy to see his commanding officer. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison was a fair and understanding leader who cared about the welfare of his men. James knew that Harrison would handle this situation with discretion and professionalism. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison approached James's position and stood next to him, pretending to inspect something about his uniform. To any tourists watching, it would look like a routine check by a superior officer. "Mitchell," Harrison said quietly, without moving his lips very much. "I understand you may be experiencing a medical issue. Sergeant Williams is going to take your position. Step back slowly and walk to the guardhouse for evaluation." James felt a wave of relief so strong that he almost stumbled. "Thank you, sir," he whispered back. "The young lady who reported your situation showed remarkable awareness and responsibility," Harrison continued. "Her grandmother explained that the child noticed you signaling for help in Morse code. Quite impressive observation skills." James managed a very small smile. "Yes, sir. Remarkable young lady." Sergeant Williams took his position next to James, standing at perfect attention with his rifle held correctly. To the tourists, it looked like a normal rotation of guards. No one realized that an emergency medical situation was being handled with military precision and discretion. James stepped back slowly and walked toward the guardhouse, trying to maintain his military bearing. Even though he felt terrible, as he walked, he caught the eye of the little girl who had saved him. She was beaming with happiness and relief, and she gave him a small wave that no one else could see. James wanted to stop and properly thank the child and her grandmother, but he knew that would draw unwanted attention. Instead, he placed his hand over his heart and nodded to her as he walked past. It was a gesture of profound gratitude and respect. Once inside the guardhouse, James was immediately attended to by the medical officer on duty. His blood pressure was dangerously low, and his blood sugar had dropped significantly. The new medication he was taking had caused an adverse reaction that could have resulted in him losing consciousness. "You made the right choice in getting help when you did," the medical officer told James as he checked his vital signs. "If you had tried to tough it out for another hour, you could have seriously injured yourself by falling." James nodded, but his thoughts were still with the little girl and her grandmother. "Sir, is there any way I can thank the people who helped me? I would like to make sure they know how much their assistance meant." The medical officer smiled. "Lieutenant Colonel Harrison is already working on that. He wants to make sure they understand how much the regiment appreciates their quick thinking and discretion." As James rested and recovered, he could not stop thinking about the lesson he had learned that day. Sometimes breaking protocol is not about being undisciplined or unprofessional. Sometimes it is about recognizing when human compassion and common sense are more important than rigid rules. The little girl had taught him that accepting help when you need it is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of wisdom and humility, and helping others when they cannot help themselves is one of the most courageous and noble things a person can do. Mary Patterson walked quickly but calmly toward the guardhouse, her heart beating fast with worry and determination. She had not felt this kind of urgent purpose since her days as a military nurse 25 years ago. Back then, she had learned to move with quiet efficiency during medical emergencies, and those skills were coming back to her now. As she approached the official-looking building, Mary took a deep breath and tried to organize her thoughts. She needed to explain the situation clearly and quickly, but she also needed to make sure she did not cause unnecessary panic or embarrassment for the young guard who needed help. Mary had spent enough time around military personnel to understand their culture and priorities. She knew that soldiers were trained to be tough and self-reliant. They were taught to push through discomfort and never show weakness. But she also knew that good military leaders cared about the health and safety of their soldiers above everything else. Standing outside the guardhouse were two men in military uniforms. One was older, with gray hair and several medals on his chest. The other was younger, probably in his 30s, with the bearing of someone who had recently been promoted to a leadership position. Mary approached the older officer with confidence. Her years of working with military doctors and commanding officers had taught her how to speak with authority and credibility in these situations. "Excuse me, sir," Mary said politely but firmly. "I need to report a potential medical emergency involving one of your guards." The older officer, Lieutenant Colonel Harrison, turned to look at Mary with immediate attention. His years of experience had taught him to take any report of a medical emergency seriously, especially when it came from someone who spoke with the calm confidence of a medical professional. "What is the nature of the emergency?" Lieutenant Colonel Harrison asked. Mary spoke clearly and professionally. "One of your guards appears to be experiencing symptoms that suggest a medical crisis. He is showing signs of severe dizziness, possible hypotension, and risk of loss of consciousness. My granddaughter observed him signaling for help using Morse code tapped against his rifle." Lieutenant Colonel Harrison's eyebrows raised slightly. Reports from civilians about the guards were not unusual, but this woman was speaking with medical terminology and providing specific detailed observations. This was not a typical tourist complaint. "Which guard?" he asked immediately. Mary pointed toward the guard position where Emma was still standing watch. "The guard closest to the main fence, sir." The young man with the pale complexion who was sweating despite the cool temperature. The younger officer, Captain Reynolds, moved to where he could see the guard Mary was describing. Even from a distance, he could now see the signs Mary had mentioned. The guard did indeed look unwell, though he was still maintaining his position with admirable discipline. "What is your medical background?" Lieutenant Colonel Harrison asked Mary. "I was a military nurse for 8 years before I retired to raise my family," Mary replied. "I served with the Royal Irish Regiment. I have seen these symptoms many times before, and I believe your guard needs immediate medical attention." Lieutenant Colonel Harrison nodded with respect. Mary's military background and medical experience gave her report significant credibility. More importantly, her calm, professional manner indicated that she understood the seriousness of the situation. "How did your granddaughter recognize Morse code?" Captain Reynolds asked with curiosity. Mary smiled slightly, thinking of Emma's remarkable observation skills. "My granddaughter has been through some difficult medical challenges of her own. She spent 2 years in and out of hospitals, and during that time she learned many things to keep her mind occupied, including Morse code that her great-grandfather had taught her before he passed away. She has become very observant about people who might be in distress but unable to ask for help." Both officers were impressed by this explanation. They understood that the little girl's own experience with illness had given her unusual insight into recognizing when someone else was struggling. "Thank you for bringing this to our attention," Lieutenant Colonel Harrison said sincerely. "We will handle the situation immediately and discreetly. Please give my personal thanks to your granddaughter for her exceptional awareness and concern, Mary." I felt relief flooding through her. These were clearly good officers who cared about their soldiers and would take appropriate action quickly. "Is there anything else we can do to help?" Mary asked. "You have already done everything perfectly," Lieutenant Colonel Harrison assured her. "You noticed a problem, you reported it promptly and accurately, and you did so in a way that protects the dignity and reputation of our Guard. That is exactly what we would hope for from someone with your background and character." Mary walked back toward Emma with a sense of accomplishment and pride. Not only had she successfully gotten help for the Guard, but she had also been able to use her old skills as a military nurse to serve others once again. When Mary reached Emma, she found her granddaughter still standing in the same spot, watching the Guard with intense concentration and concern. "Did you find help, Grandma?" Emma asked anxiously. "Yes, dear. I spoke with the commanding officers and they are going to take care of the Guard right away. They were very impressed that you noticed he was in trouble and that you understood his Morse code signals." Emma's face lit up with relief and happiness. "Really? They are going to help him?" "They are already helping him," Mary said, pointing toward the Guard positions. Emma looked and saw that another Guard in the same red uniform was now standing next to the Guard she'd been watching. A few moments later, an officer with gray hair walked over to inspect something about the Guard's uniforms. Then the Guard who had been sick stepped back and walked slowly toward the guardhouse, while the new Guard took his place. "Look, Emma," Mary whispered. "They handled it so smoothly that most of the tourists do not even realize anything happened." Emma watched as the Guard she had helped walked past their position. When he saw her looking at him, he placed his hand over his heart and nodded to her with a grateful expression on his face. Emma waved back very quietly and signed, "Feel better soon," to him. The Guard smiled just slightly and nodded again before disappearing into the guardhouse. "Oh, Grandma," Emma said with tears in her eyes. "I am so happy we could help him. He looked so scared and sick, but he was trying so hard to do his job." Mary put her arm around Emma and hugged her close. "You should be very proud of yourself, Emma. You noticed something that hundreds of other people missed. You figured out what he needed. You came up with a plan to help him, and you did it all with kindness and intelligence." Emma looked up at her grandmother. "But you were the one who talked to the officers, Grandma. I could not have done that part by myself." Mary smiled. "That is exactly right, Emma. We worked together, as a team. You used your special skills and observations, and I used my experience and knowledge. Together, we were able to help someone who really needed it." As they stood together watching the ceremony continue, Emma felt a warm sense of satisfaction and purpose. She had used the difficult experiences from her illness in a positive way to help someone else. All those hours learning Morse code and sign language in the hospital had prepared her for this moment when she could make a real difference in someone's life. Mary felt equally proud and fulfilled. She had been able to use her old nursing skills and military experience to serve others once again. More importantly, she had watched her granddaughter show extraordinary compassion, intelligence, and courage in a difficult situation. "Grandma," Emma said thoughtfully, "do you think we will ever see that Guard again?" Mary considered the question. "I do not know, dear. But even if we never see him again, we will always know that we helped him when he needed it most. And he will always remember that a little girl and her grandmother cared enough to notice his trouble and do something about it. Emma nodded seriously. I hope he feels better soon, and I hope he knows that there are people who think he is very brave for doing such an important job. Mary squeezed Emma's hand gently. I think he knows that now, Emma. I think he knows that very well. In the quiet medical room inside the guardhouse, Sergeant James Mitchell sat on a simple cot while the regimental doctor checked his blood pressure for the third time. The spinning sensation in his head had finally stopped, and his vision was clear again. The color was returning to his face, and he felt like himself for the first time in hours. Your blood pressure has stabilized, Dr. Williams said, writing notes on his medical chart. The reaction to your new medication caused a dangerous drop in both blood pressure and blood sugar. You made exactly the right choice in seeking help when you did. James nodded, but his mind was not really focused on his medical condition anymore. He kept thinking about the little girl in the red coat who had somehow understood his desperate Morse code signals and found a way to help him without causing a scene. Doctor, James said, is there any way I can thank the people who reported my situation? I would like them to know how much their help meant to me. Dr. Williams smiled. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison is already working on that. He was very impressed with how professionally and discreetly they handled the situation. Apparently, the grandmother is a former military nurse and the little girl has some remarkable observation skills. The child understood Morse code, James said with amazement. She actually recognized what I was tapping and knew I was asking for help. I have never seen anything like it. According to the report I received, she also used sign language to communicate with you. Is that correct? James nodded. She asked if I was okay and if she could help. When I confirmed that I needed assistance, she immediately went to work on finding the right people to contact. She even positioned herself to keep watching me while her grandmother went for help. Dr. Williams was impressed by this account. That shows remarkable maturity and problem-solving ability for such a young child. How did you know sign language? My younger brother is deaf, James explained. Our whole family learned to sign when he was born. I never expected to use those skills while on guard duty, but I am certainly grateful I had them today. Outside the medical room, Lieutenant Colonel Harrison was speaking with Captain Reynolds about the incident. Both officers were impressed by how smoothly the situation had been handled and how it had been resolved without any disruption to the ceremony or negative attention from tourists or media. The civilian report was exceptionally professional, Lieutenant Colonel Harrison said. The woman who came forward had military nursing experience and was able to describe Sergeant Mitchell's symptoms with medical accuracy. Her granddaughter's observation skills were truly extraordinary. Captain Reynolds nodded. It is remarkable that a 7-year-old child was able to recognize Morse code signals and understand that they indicated a medical emergency. Most adults would not have noticed anything unusual. I want to make sure we properly acknowledge their assistance, Lieutenant Colonel Harrison said. This kind of civilian cooperation and awareness deserves recognition. They potentially saved Sergeant Mitchell from a serious injury and saved our regiment from a very embarrassing incident. Meanwhile, outside the palace gates, Emma and Mary were continuing to watch the ceremony. The changing of the guard was proceeding exactly as scheduled, with perfect precision and pageantry. Most of the tourists had no idea that a medical emergency had been quietly resolved just minutes earlier. Emma kept looking toward the guardhouse, hoping to catch another glimpse of the guard she had helped. She felt a deep sense of connection to him, even though they had barely communicated, and she did not even know his name. Grandma, Emma said, do you think he has family who worry about him when he is working? Mary considered the question thoughtfully. I imagine he does, Emma. Most soldiers have parents, brothers and sisters, maybe wives and children who care about them and want them to be safe. I hope they know that someone was watching out for him today, Emma said seriously. Mary felt her heart swell with pride at her granddaughter's empathy and concern for others. I think they would be very grateful to know that, Emma. Just like we would be grateful if someone helped you when you needed it. As they watched the final parts of the ceremony, Emma noticed that one of the officers was walking in their direction. He was the older man with gray hair who had responded to her grandmother's report about the guard. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison approached Emma and Mary with a formal but warm expression on his face. He had decided that the exceptional service these civilians had provided deserved personal recognition from the commanding officer. "Excuse me," he said politely. "Are you the young lady and her grandmother who assisted one of our guards this morning?" Emma nodded shyly, suddenly feeling overwhelmed by the attention from such an important-looking officer. Mary stepped forward. "Yes, sir. I am Mary Patterson, and this is my granddaughter, Emma. We were concerned about the health of one of your soldiers." Lieutenant Colonel Harrison smiled warmly. "I want to personally thank both of you for your exceptional awareness and professionalism in handling a potentially serious situation. Your quick thinking and discretion allowed us to provide necessary medical assistance to Sergeant Mitchell while maintaining the dignity of the ceremony." Emma's eyes widened. "Is that his name? Sergeant Mitchell?" "Yes, it is," Lieutenant Colonel Harrison replied, "and he specifically asked me to express his gratitude for your remarkable observation skills and your kindness in helping him when he could not help himself." Emma beamed with happiness. It meant so much to her to know the guard's name and to hear that he was grateful for her help. "How is he feeling now?" Mary asked with genuine concern. "He is doing much better thanks to your prompt reporting of his symptoms," Lieutenant Colonel Harrison assured her. "The doctor says he will make a full recovery, but he could have been seriously injured if the situation had continued much longer." "I am very glad we could help," Mary said. "Emma deserves most of the credit. She was the one who noticed the Morse code signals and understood that something was wrong." Lieutenant Colonel Harrison turned to Emma with admiration. "Young lady, your grandfather would be very proud of how you used the skills he taught you to help someone in need. Morse code is not something most people your age would know, let alone recognize in an emergency situation." Emma felt tears of happiness in her eyes. She had not expected such kind words from such an important person, and it meant everything to her to hear that her grandfather would have been proud. "We are visiting London from Northern Ireland," Mary explained. "This was supposed to be a special treat for Emma after she finished her medical treatments. We never expected to become involved in helping one of your soldiers." "Well, you have certainly made this a memorable visit for all the right reasons," Lieutenant Colonel Harrison said. "Sergeant Mitchell wanted me to give you this small token of appreciation from the regiment." He handed Emma a small envelope with the royal seal on it. Emma opened the envelope carefully and found a beautiful card with a picture of the Queen's Guards on the front. Inside was a handwritten note. "Dear Emma, thank you for being my guardian angel today. Your kindness and quick thinking helped me when I could not help myself. You are a true hero. With gratitude and respect, Sergeant James Mitchell, Queen's Guard." Emma held the card against her heart and smiled with pure joy. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison continued, "Sergeant Mitchell also wanted you to know that he has a younger brother who is deaf, which is why he was able to understand your sign language. He said it felt like a miracle when he realized you were trying to help him communicate." This information made the connection between Emma and Sergeant Mitchell feel even more special and meaningful. They had been able to help each other because of the unique skills and experiences they had both developed through challenging circumstances in their families. "Thank you so much," Emma said to Lieutenant Colonel Harrison. "This is the best day of my whole life." As the officer walked away, Emma and Mary stood together in comfortable silence, watching the final moments of the ceremony. They both felt a deep sense of satisfaction and purpose from the morning's events. "Grandma," Emma said finally, "I think this is what Grandpa meant when he said we should always be ready to help people who need it." Mary nodded, wiping away a tear of pride and love. "Yes, Emma, I think this is exactly what he meant." 6 months had passed since Emma and Mary returned home to Belfast from their trip to London. Winter had settled over Northern Ireland, and the days were short and gray. But inside their small house on Maple Street, there was warmth and happiness that had not been there for a very long time. Emma was thriving. Her quarterly medical checkups showed that the cancer remained in complete remission. Her blonde hair had grown back thick and curly, and her cheeks had the healthy pink color that had been missing during her 2 years of illness. Most importantly, Emma had returned to being a normal 7-year-old girl who loved to play, learn, and explore the world around her. But the experience at Buckingham Palace had changed Emma in ways that went far beyond her physical recovery. She had discovered that her difficult experiences with illness had given her special abilities to notice when other people were in trouble and to find ways to help them. At school, Emma became known as the child who always looked out for others. When a new student was too shy to talk to anyone, Emma would sit with him at lunch and teach him simple games. When an older boy fell and hurt his knee on the playground, Emma was the first to run for help and the first to offer comfort while they waited for the school nurse. Emma's teacher, Mrs. O'Connor, noticed these changes in her student. Emma has developed remarkable empathy and leadership skills, she told Emma's parents during a parent-teacher conference. She seems to have an instinct for recognizing when someone needs help, and she always responds with kindness and practical solutions. Emma's parents were not surprised by this feedback. They had watched their daughter grow stronger and wiser throughout her illness, but the trip to London seemed to have given her confidence and purpose that she had never had before. One evening, in December, as Emma was doing her homework at the kitchen table, her mother brought her a package that had arrived in the mail. The return address showed it was from Buckingham Palace in London. Emma's eyes widened with excitement. She had not expected to hear from Sergeant Mitchell again, but she had often wondered how he was doing and whether he remembered their brief but meaningful encounter. Inside the package was another envelope with the royal seal, along with a small box wrapped in gold paper. Emma opened the envelope first and found a letter written in neat handwriting. Dear Emma, I hope this letter finds you healthy and happy. I have been thinking about you often since our meeting at the palace 6 months ago, and I wanted to share some news with you. First, I want you to know that I am doing very well. The doctors changed my medication, and I have not had any more problems with dizziness or fainting. I am back to full duty and continuing to serve as a Queen's Guard with great pride and dedication. More importantly, I want to tell you about something that happened because of your kindness to me. After our encounter, I began to think more about the importance of helping others and accepting help when we need it. You taught me that being strong does not mean never needing assistance from other people. I decided to volunteer with a charity that helps children who are dealing with serious illnesses, similar to what you experienced. Every weekend I visit children in hospitals around London. I have learned some of the same sign language and Morse code skills that helped us communicate, and I use these to talk with children who have trouble speaking because of their treatments. The children love hearing about my work as a Queen's Guard, and I love hearing about their courage and determination to get better. They remind me of you, brave, smart, and always thinking about how to help other people. I also wanted you to know that I have been promoted to Sergeant Major. My commanding officers said that my experience with you showed them that I have good judgment and the ability to handle difficult situations with wisdom and maturity. So in a way, helping me that day also helped advance my military career. My younger brother Tommy, who is deaf, was very impressed when I told him about how you use sign language to help me. He said you must be a very special person to notice that someone needed help and to figure out how to communicate with them. He would love to meet you someday if you ever visit London again. Please give my regards to your grandmother Mary. Her professional handling of the medical emergency was exactly what the situation required, and I will always be grateful for her quick thinking and military experience. I have enclosed a small gift for you. It is not much, but I hope it will remind you of the important lesson you taught me. That the most powerful thing we can do is notice when someone needs help and then find a way to provide that help with kindness and dignity. You are a remarkable young lady, Emma, and I know you will continue to do great things with your life. Thank you for being my guardian angel that day in London. With friendship and respect, Sergeant Major James Mitchell, Queen's Guard. Emma read the letter twice, her heart filling with joy and pride. She had not realized that her small act of kindness could have such a lasting impact on someone's life and career. Emma carefully opened the gold-wrapped box. Inside was a beautiful silver pin in the shape of angel wings with a small card that said, "For my guardian angel, with gratitude always." Emma showed the letter and the pin to her parents and grandmother, who were all moved to tears by Sergeant Mitchell's thoughtful words and generous gift. "You see, Emma," Mary said with emotion in her voice, "this is proof of what I have always told you. When we do something kind for someone else, it creates a circle of goodness that keeps growing and helps more and more people." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "Sergeant Mitchell is helping sick children now because we helped him, and maybe those children will help other people when they get better. So our help keeps going and going." "Exactly right," her father said proudly. "You started something very important that day in London." Emma carefully pinned the angel wings to her school uniform, right next to the Queen's Guard pin that Sergeant Mitchell had sent her after their first meeting. She now had 2 reminders of the day that had taught her one of the most important lessons of her life. From that day forward, Emma wore both pins to school every day. When other children asked her about them, she would tell them the story of how she helped a guard at Buckingham Palace, and how he was now helping other children who were sick like she used to be. Emma's story inspired other children at her school to look for ways to help people in their own community. They started a kindness club that visited elderly people in nursing homes, helped younger children with their reading, and raised money for charities that helped sick children. As Emma grew older, she never forgot the lesson she learned that day in London. She decided that she wanted to become a pediatric nurse like her grandmother had been, so she could spend her life helping children who were facing the same kinds of medical challenges she had overcome. Years later, when Emma was in nursing school, she would often tell her instructors and fellow students about the day she helped a Queen's Guard at Buckingham Palace. She would explain how that experience taught her that the most important skill a nurse can have is the ability to notice when someone needs help, even when they cannot ask for it directly. "Sometimes," Emma would say, "the people who need help the most are the ones who are trying hardest to be strong. Our job is to see past their strength to their need, and then find a way to help them without taking away their dignity." Emma kept in touch with Sergeant Major Mitchell through letters and occasional phone calls. He continued his volunteer work with sick children and eventually started a program that taught hospitalized children Morse code and sign language as ways to communicate when they were too weak to talk normally. The program became so successful that it was adopted by children's hospitals throughout the United Kingdom. Hundreds of children learned the same skills that had allowed Emma and Sergeant Mitchell to communicate during his emergency, and many of them went on to use those skills to help other people in their own lives. Emma's grandmother, Mary, lived to be 92 years old and saw her granddaughter graduate from nursing school and begin her career helping sick children. Mary often said that the day they helped the Queen's Guard was one of the proudest moments of her life, not because of the recognition they received, but because it showed her that all the difficult lessons Emma had learned during her illness had made her into a person who would spend her life making the world better for others. On the 10th anniversary of their meeting in London, Emma received a final letter from Sergeant Major Mitchell. He was retiring from the Queen's Guard after 20 years of service and had been awarded several medals for his military service and his volunteer work with children. In the letter, he wrote, "Emma, I want you to know that not a single day has passed in the last 10 years when I have not thought about the lesson you taught me at Buckingham Palace. You showed me that true strength comes not from never needing help, but from being brave enough to help others when they need it most. That lesson has guided every decision I have made since that day, and it has made me a better soldier, a better volunteer, and a better person. Thank you for changing my life and through my life the lives of hundreds of children who have benefited from the programs we started because of your example.